Hey, what's ready? Welcome back to News Toast, and one of the most amusing recent developments in the game industry, or at least in my opinion, is the fact that PlayStation fans seemingly love Xbox after all. I mean, I love PlayStation myself, but the fan base, they've been attacking Xbox for decades about how it quote-unquote doesn't have any games. But interestingly enough, they've been telling us a very different story this past year, and that just strikes me as to how the console war impacts certain people's behavior. So we will talk about that situation today and just what this means for the future of Xbox and PlayStation's relationship. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. I know I thank you all every video, but I truly do mean it. You all are absolutely awesome. Let's get right into things, though, starting off with an oldie but a divisive goodie, I guess you can say, being Final Fantasy XIII. I still remember when this game first launched years and years ago and all of its hype and then the disappointment that ensued, but I also feel like it's a trilogy that has kind of grown on people over time. A lot of people do remember it very fondly now, and because its visuals are still to this day just so strikingly beautiful, it's actually a series that's aged fairly well. The only problem, though, is that unfortunately, it's not available on a PlayStation 5. Now, you can go out and play it on PC and Xbox, and in fact, it got a big 4K update on Xbox a few years back. But unfortunately, it's still missing on the PS5, which makes it one of the only Final Fantasy games that you can't play on the PS5. Well, there is a chance that maybe that could change sometime in the future, because recently the 7 Remake director noted that a lot of newer employees for Square Enix have been telling him how they liked Final Fantasy XIII when they were a kid. And that's a notable difference for him than what he used to hear about games like Final Fantasy VI as one such example. So what that means is that for this newer generation of employees, they have some nostalgia for Final Fantasy XIII, and that could be a sign for them to maybe do an official PlayStation port sometime in the future. I mean, if there's internal interest, that's a good sign, if anything else. Oh, and speaking of Square Enix, Dragon Quest XI has surpassed 9 million units sold, which not only makes it the most successful Dragon Quest game, but it also makes it one of Square Enix's best-selling games, just period. And I find that to be a very interesting outcome, because this tells us what I've been saying all along. There's this idea among AAA publishers like Square Enix that they need to make their classic JRPGs into more action-focused games to appeal to a broader audience. But that's just not true. There is still a lot of love for turn-based RPGs, and we've seen that from games like Persona 5, Expedition 33, Baldur's Gate 3, or in this case with Dragon Quest XI. I mean, for that matter, Pokemon consistently puts up staggering numbers, and that's in large part because fans love its turn-based combat. So I think they need to take this as a sign and, maybe implement that into the Final Fantasy series as well. I mean, can you imagine Final Fantasy XVII with combat that's similar to, let's say, Expedition 33? I think that could sell upward of 10 million copies if they were to execute it properly. Now, Nintendo also dropped an overview for Mario Tennis Fever. It will be out here in just a month on February 12th, which will make it one of their first big games of 2026. And I have to say, I think it looks really good, and that's coming from somebody that's never really cared all that much for the Mario Tennis series. I mean, admittedly, they've always been fun games. They're just not really my thing personally. But I like how Mario Tennis Fever is shaping up. It has a lot of cool options, including 30 different special rackets, which all have their own ability. There's an HP system. If you get hit too much, you'll have to recover. And there's, I believe, 38 characters, which makes it the most in the entire series. It even has Baby Wario and Baby Waluigi. I was a bit surprised by that, but yeah, they're putting a lot of content in the game, and dare I say, this has the potential to be the best Mario sports game that we've gotten in years. So I would strongly recommend watching the full overview. It's only about 5 minutes long, but it's a fun watch, and I'm actually kind of interested in it now. So clearly, it did its job. All right, now let's just go and talk about what's happening with Xbox and PlayStation fans. And before I even start, this topic isn't really so much about just PlayStation fanboys only. It's really an indictment to how fanboys of all platforms act, because they're all very similar and all very annoying, just in different ways. However, a new discovery popped up today that I think really highlights some of that ridiculous console wars mentality, and that's for Forza Horizon 5 on the PlayStation 5, because what's happening is that it was actually one of the most successful games on the PlayStation 5 last year. Yeah, according to Alinea Analytics, it sold more than 5 million copies, which brought in an additional $300 million for Xbox. And right away, I think that tells you everything that you need to know about why Xbox is putting some of their games on PlayStation. And that's because apparently PlayStation fans kind of love Xbox games. And I'm not just talking about Forza Horizon, because other Xbox games have also performed very well on PlayStation, including Sea of Thieves and Grounded. And you know what? I'm just going to make a prediction that Halo Campaign Evolved, might do very well on PlayStation as well. And this just kind of tells me that maybe Xbox has some, good games after all. For years, PlayStation fans have been claiming that Xbox has no games whatsoever. But if you look at some of the best performing games on PlayStation these past few years, you'll start to notice that Microsoft is kind of linked to a lot of them. Now, to be completely fair, a lot of those games are directly connected to Bethesda and Activision, and that's kind of what happens when you buy up a lot of the industry. But regardless, I think the point still stands that this comes from the typical console warish mentality. Fanboys, they always seem to hate on pretty much anything that's not on their platform. And again, that's not necessarily exclusive to just PlayStation fans. PlayStation fans do tend to be very loud, and we also see that from the media as well. The media, they're a whole different story. But you do see that mentality across all fan bases, just to varying different degrees. I mean, let me just put it this way. If a game like, let's say, Soros was announced by a first-party Xbox company, well, then certain Xbox fans would suddenly love it. And if, let's say, Clockwork Revolution was announced by a first-party PlayStation company, well, then certain PlayStation fans would probably love it as well. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous if you start to think about it, but the statistics of Forza Horizon 5 kind of showcases some of that. Now, at the same time, this definitely tells us why Xbox is going in a more multi-platform direction. I mean, by this point, I think they kind of understand they're never going to win over certain fans and bring them over to their consoles. It's just not going to happen. But if they maybe meet them halfway, as we're seeing here, and put their games on PlayStation, well, then suddenly their games become a little bit more, or in this case, a lot more beloved. Now, this does, however, make me curious about Xbox's plan for Forza Horizon 6. As I said the other day, you should more or less expect every Xbox game that's in development to also be in development for PlayStation. I think the bigger question right now is whether or not their games will have any kind of timed exclusivity for Xbox consoles. So far, Xbox has been a little inconsistent with that approach, so it's kind of hard to say unless they just come out and tell us straightforward. But I think we are going to learn a lot more about that this year, possibly even at the Xbox Developer Direct later this month. Forza Horizon 6 and Fable will be there, and it's going to be interesting to see if they announce a PlayStation 5 version for those games or not. I mean, clearly, if they announce Forza Horizon 6 for the PlayStation 5, it's going to do very well. But again, I think we are going to learn a lot more about their strategy, if not this month, then definitely throughout 2026. Now, one more thing before we go, though, because rumors are starting to emerge that Nintendo will hold another Direct either in January or possibly in February. And I just want to touch upon this real quick because this is completely expected. It's always crazy to me that we always have a bunch of random people claim this type of stuff at the beginning of every year, and they like to, proclaim themselves as a leaker. And the reason I say that is because it's a fairly easy guess to make. Since 2012, outside of 1 year, which I believe was back in 2018, Nintendo has held some kind of Nintendo Direct in the month of February. So all I'm trying to say is to, this year, maybe second guess some of these random leakers that pop up. Instead, what I would do is wait for somebody that has a good track record. Like, let's say, Nate the Hate. If he comes out and says, well, a direct's going to happen the week of February 10th, well, that's a lot more believable than some random person just trying to score internet points. Especially when they attach their leak with games that will possibly be there. Definitely be skeptical of those leaks, but nonetheless, I'm sure a lot of YouTubers are going to cover Nintendo Direct leaks here in the coming weeks. So, again, just prepare yourself and just be skeptical of the sources. That's all I'm going to say. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.